Hi everyone, this is Blake Lensing in the week 6 discussion post. My first takeaway from this week was from the video Color Blindness or Color Brave. It was the idea that in order to make a real change, we must be color brave instead of color blind. We must be willing to have proactive conversations on race with honesty, understanding, and courage, which is color brave, instead of ignoring the problem, which is color blindness. This stood out to me because I have never heard of the term color brave before today, but I believe it is such a powerful statement and that by doing so, our lives will become more diversified and better. My next takeaway was from the video Race, Ethnicity, Nationality, and Jelly Beans. I really enjoyed this video because I have heard of all of these words before, but like the video said, I didn't really know the difference and used them interchangeably. I believe this video gave a good reference to what each word means. And my final takeaway was from the article White Fragility and the Rules of Engagement by Robin DiAngelo. When it says racism is the norm rather than the aberration, feedback is key to our ability to recognize and repair our inevitable and often unaware collusion. And I thought this was a powerful statement because based on the article, it talks about how hard it is to give feedback to people because people get very defensive. I loved the guidelines that they talked about in saying how, where, and when you give me the feedback is irrelevant. It is the feedback that I want and need. Understanding that it is hard to give, I will take it any way I can get it. From my position of social, cultural, and institutional white power and privilege, I am perfectly safe and I can handle it. It's on me to build my racial stamina. And I think this is a mentality that all of us need to have in order to create a better life for everyone. The question that I answered is race a social construct? Why or why not? And race is a social construct. A social construct is a category, perception, or idea created and developed by society and then applied to individuals or groups. And I got this definition from Why Colorblindness Will Not End Racism. In the video, it also talks about how race doesn't exist and isn't biological, but is a structural foundation of social power. And this idea is also supported in the race and ethnicity lecture, where they say race is not biological, it is socially constructed. And there is one race, which is the human race. Colorblindness is not a good approach to race and ethnicity as a multicultural educator because colorblindness is a way to ignore the problem, which comes from colorblind or color brave, and it will not end racism. According to the video, colorblindness will not end racism. They talk about how colorblindness is actively harmful because it creates a false sense of security to the groups it directly benefits, meaning that racism will still persist. It takes work, effort, laws, and a new system to undo racism, not just colorblindness. I believe white privilege definitely exists. When I looked at the article 10 examples that prove white privilege exists in every aspect imaginable, I realized how blessed and privileged I truly am. The one that stuck out to me was I have the privilege of soaking in media blatantly biased towards my race. And this is something that I had never really thought about, but when looking at the examples, I realized how blind I was to the problem. Like any Google search ends up being primarily white, and it's something that I need to be more aware of. Privilege refers to the control, access to services, opportunities, products, and other forms of power that all members belonging to a dominant group automatically have because of their identities. Those with privilege do not necessarily know they have it, but are still at an advantage over those without it. Prejudice is often negative judgment made before knowledge is obtained. Discrimination is action and unfair treatment against someone else. Oppression is socially and historically built inequalities that are ingrained in our system institutions. and processes which allow certain groups to dominate over the other groups. This information came from the race and ethnicity lecture. And I believe privilege, prejudice, and oppression are ones that if you are not on the receiving end of it, you don't necessarily know you're doing it. Discrimination is obviously you're thinking about doing it, and so it is noticeable on both ends. I had a friend in high school that was of Muslim heritage, and she experienced blatant racism all the time, which made her hate the race that she was. The kids would say horrible things about her being a terrorist because she looked like one, and how she was going to shoot up or bomb the school. And it broke my heart because that she was being told these things because she was one of the kindest people I had ever met. And I didn't necessarily know how to help her because I have never experienced this kind of hatred for my race before. And I was never there when the people were saying those things about her, so I could not defend her. I think this is partly why we shy away from issues of race, because we cannot be empathetic for the situation because we've never experienced the same problems. I think some systemic challenges to anti-racist in education is the idea that teachers oftentimes don't realize that their activities that they're doing are racist. For example, in the article Ending Curriculum Violence, they talk about the 4 categories of racial trauma, those being cultural or curriculum violence, digital race trauma, physical violence related to racial trauma, and verbal intimidation or threats between students or from teacher to student. The curriculum violence is classroom activities used to teach about difficult histories in a matter of acting out very sensitive subjects for some students. Students are not going to experience the impact of society or history by reenacting the events. An action that can be taken could be people taking on the 21-day challenge, racial equity habit building challenge, where you read, listen, watch, notice, connect, engage, act, reflect, and stay inspired in order to further one's understanding of power, privilege, supremacy, oppression, and equity. Other actions that should be taken include starting to talk about race with kids at a younger age, teachers holding themselves accountable, ensuring representation is at the forefront and caring about more than just themselves, as well as engaging in an equitable approach to the classroom. I think being a teacher who models cultural humility to race and ethnicity affects the classroom because, as I have said many times before, students will catch on to the feelings and actions their teachers have and do and implement them into their own lives. Teachers are some of the most influential people in a student's life, so by practicing good and positive actions will lead them down that path as well. I think the hardest part of listening to someone else's story that is different from mine is the idea that my thinking is not the only quote-unquote correct way to think. I know it is very hard to sometimes bite your tongue and listen to what people have to say, but it is essential to listen to someone's full story before responding. I have come to learn that oftentimes when listening to a person's full story, it will lead me to understand their experiences and be able to find similarities between my story and theirs. Our stories are based off of our experience, and just because you may not have experienced certain things that others have, does not mean that either one of our stories is any less valuable. So I think the question, can you recall a time when you felt like your story was diminished and not heard, as well as can you recall a time that you felt a need to defend your story and not hear someone else's story, kind of go hand in hand. Based off of one of my experiences, but it's not necessarily a story of my life. My guy friends are all engineering students, and we get into the occasional scuffle based off of the different views we have. One night we got into a conversation about a square always being a rhombus, but a rhombus not always being a square or something along those lines. This conversation kind of ended up blowing up because one of my friends thought he was right, but I had taken a class that talked about the subject, so I knew I was correct in my thinking. He ended up pretty much telling me that I had no right to question his thinking because he was in a higher math level than I was. And I was pretty hurt by that because he was saying that just because he was saying that I was not smart enough to answer the question or know the question based off of the math level I was in, even though I was learning how to teach students this exact topic. I learned to pick my battles because they are not going to change their minds on them feeling superior to me based off of our majors, and it is not worth the fight all the time. I, of course, still defend myself and my major from time to time, but it's helpful that I know my worth.